When Trump and his surrogates make contradictory and inflammatory statements, it often looks chaotic and random. But there is a methodology behind these undeniably successful tactics. While Donald Trump's political ideology is hard to pin down, it's not so hard for Steve Bannon, Trump's former campaign CEO and currently White House chief strategist. The alt-right was instrumental in Trump's election victory, and Steve Bannon, through his various conservative media outlets, acted as their organizer and their mouthpiece. Over the past 10 years, Steve Bannon has created a succession of right-wing documentaries funded by Citizens United, the conservative organization famous for winning the Supreme Court ruling that essentially gave corporations and unions the green light to spend unlimited sums on ads and other political tools. In these documentaries, Bannon frequently uses the ideas of Saul Alinsky to demonize politically left-wing activists like hippies in the 60s and 70s and the Occupy movement, frequently citing his most famous book, Rules for Radicals. Saul Alinsky was a community organizer and writer active in the 50s and 60s, coordinating poor and predominantly black communities with the aim of helping them gain power to make demands of their local government. In Alinsky's 200-page handbook for political activists or organizers, as he calls them, he lays out a detailed game plan directed at agitators for disrupting the establishment and gaining power. As Alinsky himself puts it, The Prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals is written for the have-nots on how to take it away. Bannon is not the only right-wing thinker that uses Alinsky's strategies to attack more liberal political leaders. Many conservatives like Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, and Newt Gingrich have attacked people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama for using Alinsky tactics to gain power. And there are connections. Clinton wrote her thesis on Alinsky, and Obama was director of a non-profit community development organization closely linked to Alinsky's ideas. That being said, Alinsky is not the partisan figure many on the right would have people believe. In 2012, many Tea Party leaders circulated Alinsky's book to their members, or a shortened version called Rules for Patriots. Steve Bannon himself was a great supporter of the Tea Party and made multiple documentaries following the movement. It's quite surprising just how widespread Saul Alinsky's influence has been. When Steve Bannon presents Alinsky in his documentaries, it's as an extreme revolutionary, concerned primarily with gaining power. According to Bannon, Alinsky sees the United States as a fundamentally evil entity.
When you look at the Alinsky group, you realize this is a group that it's ultimately about achieving power.
All of his techniques and so forth were based on this presumption that he was dealing with an essentially evil society.
Bannon believes that Saul Alinsky sowed the seeds for a long-term and large-scale left-wing conspiracy that penetrated American society to its core, with the aim of crippling and eventually overthrowing the American government.
The only way you can change an evil society is to bankrupt that society. Two professors at Columbia University, Cloward and Piven, developed such a strategy called the crisis strategy. The essence of the Cloward-Piven strategy was to sabotage and destroy the capitalist system by creating bureaucratic demands, excessive regulations, and entitlements that would lead to economic ruin, economic collapse, and bankruptcy.
Reading Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, it's not hard to see how these conclusions have been drawn. Alinsky is not rigidly moral, and he stresses that ethical standards must be elastic to stretch with the times. He emphasizes that in war, the end justifies almost any means. He talks often of revolution, and he was known for being inflammatory.
I'm all for it. I think our Air Force and our Army should, after they finish in Vietnam, should come back and bomb the hell out of Mississippi, you know? What would it be? Southern Mississippi instead of northern Mississippi. So we can all get freedom and equality down there, too.
Despite Bannon's vilification of Alinsky, there are a startling number of similarities between his approaches to taking power and the strategies Steve Bannon and Donald Trump have used. As Bannon himself said in 2013, "I'm a Leninist. Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all of today's establishment." Alinsky's approach to being a successful organizer was to agitate. He states, "The organizer is challenging, insulting, agitating, discrediting. He stirs unrest." Alinsky states that the organizer must polarize issues so that men will act, As he puts it in his 13th rule, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it.
Bill Clinton was abusive to women. Hillary Clinton attacked those same women and attacked them viciously. 4 of them here tonight.
This is one of the reasons so many of Trump and Bannon's attacks have been so successful. They so frequently point at a single individual or easily identifiable group as being responsible, whether it is Hillary Clinton or the spectre of Islamic extremists. When people quote Alinsky, especially his opponents, they often reach for his list of ethical and tactical rules that he lays out in this book. However, throughout the book, he also outlines the general philosophy and attitude he believes an organizer should have. In his writing, Alinsky placed an emphasis on speaking within the experience and the language of you and your audience and putting your opposition outside of their own. The stress for Alinsky is never logic and reason, but in the tactics you use. You don't have to be right, but you should be operating in an arena where you and your supporters are comfortable.
So, again, I know you're trying to build up your energy, Jeff, but it's not working
one at a time.
Yeah. Look.
Trump is a master at dictating the narrative and pulling his opponents into his arena of debate. This became extremely clear throughout the election campaign as he consistently humiliated his opponents without using traditional debating tactics. Alinsky also repeatedly stresses that consistency is not a virtue, citing several cases where political leaders have dramatically reversed their positions on issues for immediate political gain. To him, the political arena is not an ideological one, rather an arena of power politics based on self-interest. He expects those operating within this arena to become corrupted. Alinsky gives an example of deliberately being inconsistent with Lenin during the period where the Bolsheviks were in the minority against the Russian imperial government. He quotes Lenin, "In these circumstances there can be no talk of violence on our side," then continues himself, "The essence of Lenin's speeches during this period was, they have the guns and therefore we are for peace and reformation through the ballot. When we have the guns, then it will be through the bullet." Trump's speeches, especially during the election, as well as Bannon's documentaries and Breitbart articles, have all been extremely provocative and done a fantastic job at polarizing the population on so many complex and highly nuanced issues, such as immigration and abortion. These strategies are deliberate and instrumental in building such an active core group of supporters who were polarized into action. During the election, these provocations elicited harsh condemnations from all across the political spectrum. But these very condemnations from the established powers helped align Trump with those outside the political establishment, the average citizen. As Alinsky puts it, the job of the organizer is to maneuver and bait the establishment so that it will publicly attack him as a dangerous enemy. The word enemy is sufficient to put the organizer on the side of the people, to identify him with the have-nots. Trump and Bannon use these same tactics of agitation and polarization to gain a platform. A final point of convergence between Saul Alinsky and Steve Bannon is how they both rallied their supporters against those they saw as perpetrating wealth inequality.
Now I ask you, why would you be discontented with a system that provides socialism for the very poor and the wealthy and a brutal form of capitalism for everybody else?
So much of Bannon's work takes aim at the financial institutions, and he has talked extensively about the 2008 financial crisis, both in his documentaries and in numerous addresses to his conservative supporters. In his documentary Generation Zero, he attacks both parties for effectively becoming the same party, guided by the priorities of Wall Street. Steve Bannon himself is not always the most forthcoming about his own personal ideology, especially recently, and it's almost impossible to know whether he made a conscious decision to use Alinsky's tactics. In his book, Alinsky lamented on several occasions how so few of his pupils amounted to his expectations. Ironically, it almost seems as if Steve Bannon and Donald Trump, unwittingly or not, have become his most successful disciples.